So, Bitten, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Finn, for having me. I'm very excited about this.
It's an absolute pleasure. Could you just kick us off and tell everyone who's listening and myself a bit about your background and what you do today?
Oh my goodness. I try to make it short. I grew up in a small village in the middle of Sweden, 300 kilometers north of Stockholm in the country, and I moved back there. I love being here. This is my place on earth. I'm a nature person and a dog lover and, all that kind of stuff. When I was 5 years old, this is when I didn't know it at that time. Now, when I look back, I loved sugar. So I stole sugar cubes, the little cubes that we have in coffee, lumps, sugar lumps. I always try to sneak those because, I'm born 52. So there were no candy, those different candies, and we didn't have that. And we were, many siblings, so we didn't have a lot of money. So mom baked, so I can have cinnamon roll. That was about the sweets that I had. And then I grew up on really good food, thank God. Cooking from scratch, they did in those days, all the time. So I'm fortunate for that. But, I always wanted the sweets. So when I was a teenager, I started, and I got my own pocket money type thing. I started to buy candy, and mostly it was chocolate. I was absolutely, totally, deadly in love with chocolate, and through my teenage year. So that's, I try to always, I rather ate chocolate than food, but I didn't have any problem. I didn't have any consequences until I was maybe 16, 17. And I didn't know this at this time, but I woke up many mornings with anxiety. And, my parents thought it was, the puberty and hormones and that type of thing. Today, I know it was after the sugar binge, because sugar binge creates something called volatile blood sugar. And one of those, it's mood swings, depression, anxiety. So it's interesting when you look back, right? I had no idea at that time. But anyway, as soon as I got going, went to school, started moving, ate food, it disappeared. So, and then when I came to nursing school when I was 19, we were all totally obsessed about dieting and weight. It's all we talked about. I think today, how in the whole world did we manage to finish school and get an exam? We were always dieting. And the way we dieted was that we starved through the weeks, ate, a cold salad with some cottage cheese. I mean, no food. I can't believe it today. And then, of course, we binged in the evenings and at weekends, pizza, candy, chocolate, ice cream, really binged. And then we said every weekend, we said, oh God, we didn't make it this week. We're going to do better next week. So we had this sick mentality. And I was gaining weight and losing weight and gaining weight and losing weight. But anyway, so somebody said, if we start smoking, we're not going to eat so much. It's a appetite suppressant. So I started smoking, and I love that. Woohoo! From day one, I was a Marlboro girl, smoking like crazy. And of course, then you didn't eat so much. You took a cigarette instead. We had no idea how dangerous this was. And then a little bit later, I started drinking because that was in my culture. We were drinking and going out dancing, and I loved it. I love being a party girl, and I could handle alcohol very well, so I could drink a lot. Today, I know that's a sign of, becoming an alcoholic for many. But anyway, so in the beginning, same there, no consequences. And, I was doing good through the weeks, studying, being a nurse, started working as a nurse, but partying was the big thing on the weekends or when I was off. So anyway, the years passed by, and, I met this American in Sweden, and I moved to US. So, and started, studying to be a nurse there or take my state board exam. I was a nurse already, but you had to take that. And I remember, in Swedes, if they're going to drink on the weekend, they buy alcohol. They don't have a bar at home, but the Americans have a bar. So suddenly I was in a home with lots of booze. And I loved it, of course. But my now ex-husband started to protesting that I drank too much. He asked me to cut down on drinking. And I thought it was just being silly, because I thought he was the one having a problem with me drinking. I didn't have a problem. I love drinking. But anyway, so one day he had it after me being way too drunk a couple of times or more. And so he forced me into treatment. This was the 26th of September, 1985. And I was drunk when I arrived at the treatment center. This was supposed to be one of the best in California, Capistrano by the Sea, down at Newport Beach. So that's where he dumped me, as I felt it. I was livid. I couldn't believe me, an alcoholic, and also filled with shame, of course. So, but anyway, the staff was incredible, professional. It was one of the most holistic, beautiful treatment protocols I've ever encountered, you know, and it still is today. That's still my dream role model of what should be included in a treatment center. We don't have any of those in Sweden that have all those things within the program. I wish we had. So anyway, I was there for 6 weeks. And that was the turning moment in my life. So my life did a 180. I became sober. And not only that, I fell in love with addiction medicine. Because during that stay, you know, we were taking classes in dopamine system, neurotransmitters, reward center. And back in Sweden, alcoholism was a psychosocial problem, a moral flaw. You know, it was because you didn't have a job, because you were depressed, because of your childhood, because. And here I learned that it is a primary illness. It's not because of something. Well, because of your sensitive brain and the psychoactive substance, you know, but not caused by anything outside. So that was a shock, total shock. And I felt sort of fooled too, that, you know, I had those years drinking and feeling miserable when I was hangover and all that, and nobody told me it was an illness that could be treated. So I decided this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So, you know, when I came home from that 6-week treatment, I had made up my mind. I'm not going to go back to nursing. This is what I'm going to do. So I started studying and learning all that I could. And I started to work with a lady in Redding, in a city in Northern California. She worked with employee assistant programs. We taught the bosses and people at different companies what alcoholism was, and we motivated them to go to treatment and get help. So that's what I worked with. And then my ex-husband thought, you know, okay, now we have lived here. No, you have lived with me here for 6 years. Now let's go to Europe and I live with you for a while. And I wanted that. I wanted to go home to my mom and my siblings and all that. I'd lost my father to cancer, which is the biggest disaster that happened in my life. The biggest trauma, or whatever you want to call it, when I was 33. But mom was here and siblings, and I wanted back to this country. So that's what I did. And my husband didn't want to live here, so he moved to Stockholm, and I think he's still in Stockholm. I don't know. But anyway, this is many years ago. This was 89. And I started to work at the treatment facility, and I started to work at the local jail with sober criminal care. But we never achieved that, because no matter what we did, there were always drugs in the jail, believe it or not. I have my suspicion where it comes from.
So when you said you never achieved that, you never achieved getting particular people sober in jail?
Sober. Okay. You know, we took urine tests on them, and there were always people
not one
that were positive. Not everyone, but most of them were positive on cannabis, benzodiazepines. So they must have smuggled it in somehow. We never figured out how.
Yeah, I think there's a whole level of corruption and sort of guards helping things in there. I mean, no comment.
No comment. I know. I think I know how it got in there, but you know, it's prescription. It's out. It's so many years ago. It's nothing. The jail is not in town anymore. Anyway. So anyway, that's how my devotion to addiction medicine started. So that's what I've done for the rest of my life. But when I've been sober for 7 years, I was listening to Terry Gorski. He was the #1 relapse prevention counselor, you know, in the US. And he was over in Sweden in the spring of 92, February 92. And I was listening to him on a training for 2 days. And that's when my life took another 180, because he said that recovering alcoholics and drug addicts that keep smoking, drinking lots of coffee, and eat junk food, they are the first one to relapse. And my nurse brain said, wait a minute, how is that connected? Why is that connected? And that was my first inkling of biochemistry. That this is, you know, nobody talked about it in that way before. Nobody, you know, it was, well, that alcoholics smoked. That was just, you know, why not? Yeah, they had to quit alcohol, so keep smoking.
And I want to just jump in there, because, you know, it's a fascinating route that you've had into finding addiction, understanding yourself, understanding that it's, you know, a disease rather than just an issue of discipline, which is often cast in, you know, the layman's term is like you're not disciplined enough, you don't have the right meaning or the purpose, you know, you're just doing something wrong. So
yeah, really, sure.
But now you've had this again. You're going even a step further of what we see as classic addiction, which is the things like heroin or substance abuse or cocaine or all these other things, and alcohol. And that
subscription pills. I like to add
exactly subscription pills,
painkillers. Yes,
100%. All of that category of you know, quick gratification pills that you take, or inject or snort or however you want to do it, or drink. To this next level, which is the ubiquitous substance of food, you know, and so a food, and
nicotine nicotine
and caffeine, and I just want to go into, how do we identify, because we want to get into some of this, but for someone who's just listening, who's never really had a might not have a relative in addiction, who might not have any of this sort of personal experience with it, they think, but how do we know a bad habit from an addiction?
Okay, very easy. Loss of control, hide, lie, sneak. Nobody hide, lies, sneak with cucumbers or peppers or something like that. So, you know, it's a specific type of food. It is carbs, sugar, sweeteners, flours, processed foods. Those are the category which act as a drug on our reward center. And we have tons of research showing that today. So we know it is that. But then it could be confusing when you look at people that overeat anything, even boiled cod or boiled meat cod. Or that's a good one, right? You know, because people say to me, but you know, I don't overeat only sweets. I overeat everything. And then they think that's why I'm not a sugar addict. To me, that sounds like, and then I can keep the sugar in my diet, right? That's the illness talking. But, you know, it's actually carbs that are a drug.
Why is that? When you say like in the reward centers of the brain, like what specifically about this science? What can you tell us?
Okay, because it releases dopamine, and dopamine, you could call it, you know, your neurotransmitters is like a symphony in your body, or a pendulum. There are neurotransmitters that make you alert, energetic, you know, more high, euphoric. And there are the ones that are calming, slowing you down, relaxing, and all that. And, you know, it is a pendulum that should be in balance. You should be active or you should be calm. Breathe in, breathe out. So you can say that dopamine is like the conductor for the symphony. And if something triggers the release of dopamine, like normally, if you eat I'm not talking about addiction now, I'm talking about the healthy, normal way. So you're hungry and you eat. You get probably 150 units, from 100 to 150, a release of dopamine. Those are fictive numbers, as you understand. I'm just making a point.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
So you get a little raise. You feel satisfied because we're made to be hungry and eat. That's normal. So when you're satisfied, you're satisfied. When we have sex, it's more. It's like 200. It's more intense, more dramatic. But if you take a drug and you have the genetic proclivity of addiction-prone brain, which is one of the things that has to be there in order for it to be an addiction. The other are culture and the substance, right? Or the process. You can get up to 1,000.
Wow.
So you can imagine 150, 200, and 1,000. Woo-hoo.
Yeah. It's going to feel pretty dull getting the 150 and 200 in comparison to the 1,000.
So you get a tremendous release of dopamine, which affect other neurotransmitter, endorphins and adrenaline, noradrenaline. It's a whole day to lecture if we want to go into the nitty-gritty about that. And at the same time, it raises, speeds you, it depletes you of the relaxing ones. So then you have to take something to numb or relax or be able to go to sleep. So you will start destroying that delicate pendulum, the balance. And also the interesting thing, Finn, is that we are born with a certain neurotransmitter makeup, all of us. We are extroverts, we're introverts, we have different personalities. That's in our genetic makeup. That's who we are. We should never change that, by the way. You should never change your personality. You can work on your behaviors, but you shouldn't, change your personality. So anyway, if you, I'm a speed freak. I speak fast, I walk fast, I do things fast. I speak before I think, I'm very spontaneous, like, intense to like this. So I like speed. And the interesting thing is that alcohol and sugar acted as speed on my brain. But a person with a different neurotransmitter makeup, for them, alcohol could be a number. Isn't that amazing? The same drug could act different in different people because of our biochemistry. That's very important to understand. So I used to ask people, what do you want to achieve with your drug? Well, I want to be speeded, or I want to be calm. I want to turn off. Oh, okay, fine. And it could be the same drug. But usually, people that want to turn off, they use cannabis in all kinds of forms. They use benzodiazepines, numbers. Whereas the speed freaks like me, I still say today, thank God I didn't find cocaine and amphetamine. I would have killed myself because I would have loved that.
It's fascinating that also the things we see, like alcohol can affect people so differently. Like, just like you're saying, like some people, it makes them really happy and giddy and everything's good and fun. And some people, it makes them into an absolute asshole where they just want to argue with everyone. They want to, bring their people down. They want to fight. They want to get physical. They want to get violent. Like, so
or they want to sleep, or they want to sleep,
or they want to sleep, or they want to
Yeah.
sleep, and so that's a difference in genetics.
Yes.
Or that's the person's psychosomatic before knows, oh, I get aggressive on alcohol, and then it kicks it in.
Well, it's both, because it's everything that's psychosomatic is somatopsychic.
Explain that for us.
Well, psychosomatic means that something like grief will give you headache or back pain. Something psychic makes a physical symptom, right? Okay, somatopsychic is when your body is out of balance biochemically. Then that can give you depression, anxiety, suicidal thought, aggression, irritation. So it works both ways.
Wow.
And the paradigm shift that I've tried to talk about for years is that we have to be aware of somatopsychic. It could be that if your microbiome, your intestinal flora is totally broken, you could be very depressed or very angry because, your stomach communicates with your brain much more than the brain communicates with your stomach. So in a way, you are your germs in your stomach. That's funny, right? But we have a lot of research on that today. Before, the 70s view is psychosocial. Everything is your childhood, the way you were raised, the culture. It's only that. And that is totally neglecting that we are so biochemically unique in the way we react to things. I mean, just think about coffee. Some people can stay awake for 2 days on 2 cups of coffee. Other people can drink 5 cups of coffee. Nothing happens. Because their body, their liver, their P45, 450 could break down caffeine. Other people can't. So we are, I love the book Biochemical Individuality by the physicist Roger Williams. It was written 1956, but, it's been printed now again because it's so important. I remember looking at that in the beginning of the 90s, just, seeing that if you open a lot of people, their liver will look very different and act really different. So we are biochemically unique.
It's fascinating because so much of what we see
makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, but so much of what we see is like cookie cutter answers for people. Like, oh, caffeine has a half-life. I often hear this. Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. Nothing talked about around genetics, nothing talked about around individuality. And I was speaking to the guy who his name's gone at the moment, but he is the host of the Carnival Cast podcast, and he had to quit coffee because
Carnivore MD or who?
No, it's Carnival Cast, it's called. So he interviews
okay.
lots of sort of individuals who have their own experience with the carnivore diet. Scott, that will come to me over time, Scott something, but he talks about he has 24. It would take him 24 hours or so to sleep after he'd had a cup of coffee. But he was having coffee all the time. He just couldn't sleep, but he didn't make the connection between even a coffee in the morning was stopping him sleeping that night.
Yeah, I know. And I have clients like that.
Yeah, and it's, even when I was a kid, you were talking about your experience with sugar when you were younger, and I was an absolute sugar addict when I was younger. And like, I didn't make the connection between having a cup of tea, heavily caffeinated tea at 5 p.m. I was 7 or 8 or 9 years old, 5 p.m. and I couldn't sleep at night. And, I was having sweets and biscuits and chocolate at 5 p.m. as well. Couldn't sleep. And I just thought I had insomnia. And so they were sort of diagnosed as
something psychological, and nobody knew about. Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
I know. And this is something I have harped for years now, the somatopsychic, and my belief and all those thousands of clients that I have met through the years and worked with is that biochemistry rules psychology. And, finally, there is a book out now. It's called Brain Energy. Have you seen it? By Chris Palmer?
No.
Now, he's a Harvard psychiatrist. And what he's writing in that book, I've talked about for at least 12 years, that, mental illness is metabolic dysfunction in your brain. And also one of the teachers in my training, the 1 year that I do for professionals, Georgia ED, she talks about cerebral glucose hypometabolism. I am so grateful. You don't know how grateful I am that these, they haven't listened to me being just a little nurse, talking about sugar addiction, which are skeptical towards. But these 2 psychiatrists, they are getting their message through, and it's going to help thousands of people.
What was the issue you mentioned there? Sorry to cut you off. That cerebral.
That's Georgia EDs. Well, first she talks about that, the brain is a hybrid engine. How important ketones is for the brain, because we all love keto, all 3 of us, and many more that I work with. But cerebral glucose hypometabolism.
And what is that?
Well, there is a dysfunction in the brain to process sugar, and usually it is because you eat too much carbs. That's one of the reasons, and that would give you, I used to call it volatile blood sugar many years ago, and I wrote that in my book, my third book too, a list of that. Depression, anxiety, terrible mood swings that the psychiatry would call bipolar. It is because, this delicate gel and fat clump you have between your ears is extremely sensitive to glucose fluctuations and malnutrition. The plant-based food that people think is good today is extremely dangerous.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, how I actually came across your work was in a book called Metabolic Madness by Rachel Brown. Yeah. And she goes by, I think, Carnivore Psych on Instagram. And certainly her and Natalie E. West, they're both psychologists or psychiatrists who focus on curing mental illness with diet and seeing diet as one of the, key areas, just as you're saying, and certainly carbohydrates and plants.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. It's very, but because, you're not made for that. I mean, the fatty acid in the 60% fat brain that you have, 60 to 70%, it is animal fat. It's EPA, DHA. It's not, vegetarian oil. I tell you, it's very dangerous for the brain. So, I build what I'm saying about genetics and science, not, I think it's so funny. I saw this cartoon the other day. How come vegetarians, if they're the vegans, talk so highly about veggies and love veggies? How come they make it taste like meat?
Yeah, I've seen that as well. It's a good point. They're just always chasing meat, but not allowed to have it.
It's hysterical funny.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm curious, like there's been sort of a resurgence in, and this is sort of a slight segue here, but there's been a resurgence sort of in the carnivore community and the sort of keto community, people saying like, there is some element of carbs that we need to make us thrive. People talking about needing fruit in the diet, people talking about, it's not actually bad, and so what's your take on that? Do you see like some level of carbohydrate as necessary or?
Well, I used to eat carnivore in periods. I haven't done it long enough to feel that I have any nutritional deficiency, but I do eat veggies, above ground veggies now and then. Fruit doesn't work on sugar addicts, so then you have to put that into account.
When you say it doesn't work on sugar addicts, like they shouldn't have fruit.
Sugar. It's too much sugar, too much fructose sugar that triggers us. So sugar addicts, I don't recommend sugar addicts to eat fruit. I say stay away from that.
From any sugar.
Any sugar. So animal meat, any animal meat, eggs, fish, meat, whatever, and veggies above ground in small amounts.
Yeah. That's the thing.
And fat, of course, a lot of fat. A lot. If you're gonna eat like that, you have to be fat adapted. You have to eat a lot of fat.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fascinating because there's so much evidence showing the link between low carbohydrate nutrition and a reduction in psychological disorders, like even epilepsy and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And
in nursing school, 73. But epilepsy.
But why? But it's so sort of almost, I want to say, suppressed. Like that information.
Addiction is suppressed. Addiction is, a physical brain illness, a primary illness, not caused by something. It does give physical, psychological, social, and spiritual consequences. I.e., put the horse in front of the wagon is what I tell people all the time, because you're always trying to dig for a cause. There is no cause. It's a recurrent illness. It's a chronic illness. It's a deadly illness, but it's a physical brain illness. It's about the brain, So we have to remember that. And the suppression is of people that want to earn money on people eating junk food and drinking and drugging. And I mean, in Sweden right now, we have this wave of violence, people shooting each other, and it's in the papers every day. I get bored with it almost.
Stop reading the papers.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. I see the headlines sometimes, but to tell you what, it's all about drugs. Who's going to own this town? Who's going to sell drug in this town? And it's drugs more than ever here. So any work we have done, we who talk about, how dangerous drugs are and that we need treatment and addiction is an illness, we haven't even put a dent in it. So, that it's a massive propaganda, a massive, follow the money. What more can I say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I put a post up the other day and I think it resonated with you, and it was of the sort of the normalization of things like obesity that we see in society. And you can see the campaigns from Calvin Klein back in 1999 and two reasonably healthy looking individuals on there. I think it was, I want to say Matt Damon, but I don't think it was Matt Damon, and Kate Moss or someone who maybe a little bit too skinny. But then we look at it today, or 2022, and it's two severely obese individuals. And that's what they're running their campaign with. And I don't think either side is good. I don't think the anorexic model is any better than the obese model. But the healthy weight model is always sort of missed out there. And we're seeing this huge rise in obesity and this body positivity movement, which it normalizes the whole issue of obesity. And people shouldn't berate themselves for being obese, but they should take measures to taking action on what is a really severely unhealthy illness.
I don't look at any obese people with any negative view on how they look. I feel as a nurse very sad how all the organs are broken, how they are fooled by a food industry, how they're going to get diabetes, maybe being blind, amputating parts of their body. I see a very, very unhealthy, sick person, because that's what it is. The same way I would see a really skinny, starving person being broken on the inside, malnutrition, lack of fat in their brain. They don't understand what I'm talking to when I talk to them, because, it doesn't function up there because they're so malnutrition. That's what I, as a nurse, see. Not that I condemn them for how they look. And this is the picture we have to put out there.
Yeah, but that's what it's cast as, isn't it? It's cast as you're going against your fat shaming.
Yeah, fat shaming. I think it is sick. That's people. And also, you have to remember one thing. Red dog, which is what I call the addictive illness, will, always want a backdoor, always trying to protect the drug in some way. It's very hard to have people surrender, to really close all the back doors and to really understand the addictive nature, the addictive illness in depth, down in the pit of the stomach. They can understand addiction sort of here academically, scientifically, but when you start looking at addiction, you're going to hear how the red dog will bark to protect the drug.
Can you tell us a bit about that, and how sort of, because in my mind, I think of, if you do have a sugar addiction, it's the rationalization of why you don't have an addiction or why it's not a problem for you. I mean, can you explain like the red dog bark?
Yeah, well, the red dog comes from the Indian story. The dad is saying to his son, why do you do dangerous, destructive things? And the little boy say, well, there's two dogs in my head fighting. One is blue, one is red. When the red wins, I do these stupid things. And then, of course, the enigma is who's going to win the battle? And the answer is the one you feed or nurture. Okay. So that's how I built my concept, in the treatment. So if you're an active addict, it's your red dog that is acting out. You are a blue dog too. And I'm helping you to find your healthy part and build that, growing your blue dog. And, sort of suppressing or domesticating your red dog if you want. But you can't kill the red dog. It's always going to be there. But, you know, you can get tools and treatments and professional help and support groups and all that, and knowledge. You need knowledge to understand how you can domesticate the red dog to stay in the basket and not act up and make you relapse and start using again. Because, you know, it's cunning, baffling, powerful, and very, very, very patient, right? You can, I see people be sober for 20 years, take one drink and die in 1 week. I've seen all kinds of horrible things in that way.
Terrible.
So you can't kill the red dog, but you can learn how to contain it, or I don't like to say control, because, you know, addiction is a loss of control issue. So controlling is never good, but contain it or domesticate it is a better word. But the red dog will always be like water around the ship, you know, getting a chance to, if you come in a situation, it will start messing with your thought. And it's very seductive, very seductive. You know, I've been sober for a long time and, you know, think, well, you know, I can smoke that pot with these friends here now, just for now. I can quit tomorrow. That's what the red dog will fool you to think. You know, and it is so mischievous, so seductive, so sneaky, so manipulative. So, you know, and you can look at really, when you work with thousands of clients and you listen to red dogs day out and day in, you can start hearing the whisper behind the words. No, I don't want to use, you know, I'm really going to eat like this and I'm really going to stick to this and da, 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 da. But now and then you hear some strange sayings like, well, you know, I'm going to go to that party, but of course I'm not going to eat, but I will. You start hearing some kind of defense before anything happened, or
sort of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, you start picking up this, you know. So that's what I mean with, you know, it's extremely, if you're going to teach professionals like I do, and I see too that some of them pick up this right away and start hearing everything behind the lines. And this is the best way to help the client, to undress that, to, you know, tell them, you know what, it sounds good what you're saying, but I hear the red dog behind all of that. And they go, what? Me? No. And we start picking it apart a little bit. And, you know, then you find the back doors. They want to have a little back door. Sometime, somewhere, I will go back to this drug. And I'm telling you, that's not because that person is weak or bad or anything. It is because the drug is so strong.
But it's not the drug in particular, or the addiction, because we're talking about
the drug which is causing the addiction. So what I say, you know, I could give you an example about the opioid crisis. You know what those shackled people, the family that made all the oxycodone, what they said.
Yeah.
The thing they spread was that it's only if you are psychic ill or weak or broken in a way, that's when you become addicted. Everybody else could take those pills and nothing gonna happen. What does the cannabis promoters say? Same thing. You know, cannabis in itself is not dangerous, but it's only if you're broken or weak or, you know, something is wrong with you, then you can become addicted. That's bullshit. Excuse my French.
No, love it. More French here, please.
Pardon me?
I said more French here, please.
Some of the things that I think we need to raise awareness, Finn, is never, ever underestimate the drug's power over your reward center. That's a sentence that I want people to understand. It has an incredible power over us.
But this is where the genetic disposition comes in, though, because some people can use it. Some people can drink 2 beers in a night, and some people can have, you know, recreational drug use.
Yeah, they can eat a piece of cake or cookies or anything, and nothing going to happen. Nothing going to happen. And that's why also, when I worked all these years, I divide people into 3 groups. We have the social users. You know, they get a glass of wine, they sip it, nothing happened. There's no fireworks in their head. They think maybe it tastes good, and they could put it away, don't know where they have it. And they can do the same with cakes or cookies or candies. Say, oh, that's rich, I'm having enough. They leave half the dessert, and they have nothing with that. That's the social users. They have no consequences. And I call them the normies, for joke, normies. Yeah. And then we have another group, also a big group, called harmful users. They are the ones that eat when the boyfriend broke up. You see those commercials when they lay and cry, a woman is crying and eating ice cream. That's a classic, right? And you comfort eat, you eat on emotions, you eat because you're stressed, you eat because it's a culture, you eat because it's party. I mean, harmful use, then you can ask, why do you do this? And you could use moderation, drinking, moderation, eating. You can teach them better coping strategies, or put a low carb fact book in their hand and see what carbs does to your body. You can work with them in all those kinds of ways. An addict, you cannot it's ruled by something else. And
you dropped out just there. You said you were just at the point where you can't do those interventions with an addict, and then it cut out.
Oh, it did, because you can't ask why, because it is a primary acquired illness. The only thing you can ask with addicts is, how can I help you? You can't say why, because we don't know why we keep doing it with all the consequences we do. Of course, we have to come up with sort of reasons that we think it is, but we are totally obsessed, mentally obsessed. We're just going to keep doing it until we die if nobody arrests us. And so this totally different ball game. And that's why I developed, this instrument, sugar, where I do a diagnostic evaluation of a client to see, is it harmful use or is it addiction? And I only work with addicts. I've only wanted to work with addicts. So if it is harmful use, I refer them to somebody, a psychologist, a cognitive behavioral therapy, stress coach, what have you. If it is addiction, I know what to do with them.
So these, I think I've seen some of the elements of the test. It's sort of, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's looking to see if people are eating beyond fullness, if they're eating more than they planned, if they're eating until they're sick, if they're going out of their way to obtain these foods, if they're prioritizing eating over spending time with others, feeling negative afterwards, withdrawal symptoms, cravings, like trying to get a bearing on these elements.
Yeah, we want to see how how you react, how your brain and your body react to the drug. That's the key, that is, showing if you're addicted or not. So it's very important to know that, you don't take a client and you say, well, I think that bump on your hand is cancer. Maybe you should try this pill. I mean, you would take a biopsy, you would do an incredible examination, you would x-ray, you would really know what you're dealing with. And with addiction, we throw that word around us like, nothing, not understanding how severe it is. It's very important to do a very proper evaluation. And the same instrument I use for alcohol, pills, and drugs. So, are you drinking because you're an alcoholic, or are you a harmful user?
Well,
same game.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to try and get deeper on now, is for instance, if you're an alcoholic, or if you're not an alcoholic, but you just drink a lot, and then you still are going to have withdrawal symptoms when you take that alcohol away, right?
Yeah, you can have that. Of course, you can have withdrawal. You can do drunk driving. You can do a lot of crazy things, even if you're not an alcoholic. Yeah. So, it doesn't mean that to be a harmful user, you have no consequences. You can have consequences, but you don't have the addicted brain.
And that's where I want to go with the food element, because you can have withdrawal from sugar. And
absolutely horrible
and
withdrawal.
And that's what I think is so prevalent now, whether we say addiction or not. Like the amount of obesity we've seen rising in current years, at least at the very least, at the very minimum, is there's a huge increase in harmful use of sugar or harmful use of foods. So do you see an increase in prevalence of addiction, or is this
tremendous? I mean, yes, absolutely, it is. You know, I don't want to start guessing, but I would think that when I started working, you know, it's going to be 30 years, October this year, when I started working with food addicts.
Wow.
Which we called food addicts at that time, because we didn't have the science about sugar, sweeteners, flour, and all that. We didn't have the science what the psychoactive substance in the food was. We do today. So anyway, when I started working with that, you know, I did a couple of small surveys. It was a total of 400 people. I used the UNCOPE instrument, the 6 simple questions. That's on my website. And if you have 2 yes or more, you do have a problem, but it doesn't say if you have harmful use or addiction. But, you know, I saw by doing the instrument sugar on many after they did the questions that 0 to 1, yes, social user, you know, indicated very well. 2 to 3, yes, you know, a harmful user. But 4 or more, yes, addiction. So at that one time, I had 400 nurses as the big nurses fair in Stockholm, and we did that on them, or they filled it in for us. And 1/3 was social user, 1/3 indicated harmful use, and 1/3 addiction. So that would be about 33%. I would say, this is many years ago, I would say that at least twice as much addicts today.
Wow. So that's up to
60%. Absolutely. Maybe more.
Specifically
some people say more.
Specifically in food, or would you say across all substances?
No, I would say food. And then, you know, it's important to understand that sugar is a gateway drug. Sugar is the drug that paves the way for all other drugs, you know, and the number 2 drug that people take after sugar is alcohol. Because when sugar have, you know, really hampered your brain and screwed up your neurotransmitter substance, you have drug-seeking behavior. So you go for something else that would give you the same effect, because now you have, you know, really high tolerance. So you can't eat that much to get the high anymore, and you don't have enough dopamine, and you have something called downregulation in the receptors, which is too complicated to take in detail here. But let me tell you, the brain gets really screwed up. So, you know, so if you look at alcoholics and narcotics, the drug addicts, and ask them how they ate when they were children, you're going to see that they loved sugar. So sugar is the gateway drug. So that's why, you know, the biggest percentage of addicts all over is, you know, sugar, flour, processed food.
But we see many people who go through substance addiction, and then they get clean either through these treatment programs, and then they will lean heavily on sugar or tobacco or caffeine. So
but if I were to do the instrument on them, if I were to ask the correct question, you would see that sugar came first. In the childhood, teenage year, they were sugar addicted. And then they went on to nicotine, alcohol, and so on, and drugs. And then when you take that away, sugar is left, because the treatment centers today don't understand that they should take away the sugar too. Of course they should, because I become very, very overweight. They get diabetes, inflammation, they get all kinds of illness. And, you know, that makes me terribly sad to see that, you know, you came out of the hell from one drug, but you went straight into the next one that will give you so much physical and psychological damage. So that's very sad.
Well, that's the thing. And I think lots of people don't even see things like pasta or bread or these other refined carbohydrates as sugar. You know, it's essentially, it all breaks down into sugar, and it's still the same reward center for the brain. And it's that feeling of like sort of tired numbness after you've had a, you know, high carbohydrate meal that people end up, you know, they want that feeling of like dopamine. They want that hit.
And you know, it's not only that. I would say that flour, bread, pasta, and all that, the people that are addicted to that, they are much more physical sick, because it destroys the villi in your intestine. So you have severe nutritional deficiencies, and the microbiome gets very, very broken down by, you know, all the gluten.
This is see, exactly, like things like gluten and the lectins and other plant toxins that increase gut permeability, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Actually, there was one biologist, he's dead now, he died of age, he was pretty old when I met him, and he said to me that grains is not for human consumption. I learned that maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I didn't have all the evidence, you know, all the research that we have today, but it was interesting. He said that to me. It's only good for rats because they have the right enzyme to break it down. And that's interesting. And, you know, people think that you can't live without bread.
Well, I mean, this is the whole issue has been that we've had the advent of agriculture, and the advent of agriculture allowed us to produce a high volume of grains and these easily sort of farmable goods. And then the advent of you know, these big agricultural companies that could produce these herbicides and pesticides that would work very well, and, you know, create a lot of calories for people, because a lot of people still don't think that we have a plant-based diet. People think we need to move in the direction of a plant-based diet, but I think it's something like 60 to 70% of calories across the globe that are consumed by humans are plant-based. Like, it's all these grains, it's all of these, you know, maize, corn, wheat, barley, and all these grains we should have never consumed in such volumes that we do, because these grains are seeds. They're meant to go forward and let the plant proliferate. They're meant to pass through
them and then poop them out so they can grow.
Exactly. And many people are okay with them because they're in a low enough quantity and low enough moderation, but many people are not. Many people do not make the connection, and it's very, very sad.
No, and they, you know, in order to be healthy, they should take away all of it, all the grains.
Unfortunately so, but I think the whole thing gets conflated with people who are saying, you know, it's all about balance, and, you know, and in order to have balance, you can also eat the junk food and everything.
But would you say that to an alcoholic, that, you know, is an alcoholic? It's all about balance. You should probably, or maybe you could take a little bit of heroin on Saturday to a drug addict.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how it's possible. That is literally what people say to people who don't understand. I mean, that is literally, oh, why can't you just like have a bit of moderation, or why can't you just like this? But I'm sure, just like you're saying, you've seen the increase in addictive traits in people, in food and everything. Like, this is a widespread problem that's so entrenched with people who are going, you know, I'm not addicted to this stuff. I can stop anytime. But they're severely overweight, they're obese, they know that they have a sugar consumption that's too high. It's like the cognitive dissonance. It's like, if I just find the right sport, or if I just get on the right training program, then and get a bit of momentum, then I'll be fine. And that never comes.
But Finn, any addict can quit. You know, lock him up. You know, you have to quit, right? If you're locked in jail or whatever. So I like to point out.
That's not taken in the form of agency.
I like to point out, if somebody gets threatened enough, or, you know, get enough, you know, you lose your job, or I take the kids, or you have to quit, or they get a deadly diagnosis, people can quit. Addicts can quit. My point is, an addict will always pick up again. My point is that, yes, because that's an argument that people use. Well, you know, I went on low carb for 3 months, or I can't be an addict. Well, what kind of benefits did you receive from that? Yeah, this and that and so forth. But it was so boring. So I started eating normal again. You see what I mean? This is red dog bullshitting. This is red dog in its glory, fooling you, trying to get you back to the drug. So never, ever underestimate the drug's power over your reward center. So it's very important to remember these things. Because social user, if you tell them, you can't have peanuts, you're going to die, they put it away. They don't even think about it. And harmful user does the same. And addicts say, oh, sure, I'm not going to eat them. But, wait 3 months, they pick up again.
But that's often because the triggers aren't identified. The illness isn't understood. The things like trying to, let's say you have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, you quit the alcohol for 2 months, but the only way that you quit is by avoiding your friend circle. Yeah, white knuckling it, avoiding your friend circle, avoiding the places that you used to go, isolating yourself, just pure sort of inverted commas discipline. And then you get to a point where you're either so lonely and isolated because the only way you've been able to do it is avoiding the only friends that you have. You're so
bored, you die.
You're bored. You're worn down from every day having to resist this urge without understanding that you have many other issues at play there. So all of this feeds into this whole cycle of
to have a drink. I deserve to have a drink.
Yeah, I deserve to have a drink, or I deserve to have a cake, or I deserve to have this, or I deserve to relax.
I mean, can you name another chronic, severe brain illness where you think you should treat yourself?
Well, and you know what is and that thing is causing the harm itself.
Since addiction is so severe and our brain becomes so faulty rewired and hampered from the drug, the physical, it doesn't function properly, So you need, tools, you need knowledge, you need tools, you need support. So if you get those, you don't end up at that point after 2 months, 3 months, because that there are different things you can do to feel good about yourself that doesn't involve the drug. So I like to, I do a metaphor for my clients, where I see you as a beautiful castle with billions of rooms. That's your brain connections, And when you're born, there's wiring going everywhere, electrical wiring going everywhere, but the electricity isn't connected to all the rooms yet. That's your childhood. That's, bonding, that's food, that's proper care, that's love, that's, challenges for you to learn. That's how you reconnect. That's how you wire. Okay, so when you put a drug in there somewhere early, like 4 or 5 years for children with sugar, right? That starts being hampered. So, now you have the wiring, but you don't have electricity everywhere. And one of the parts is where your personality is prefrontal cortex gets hampered. And that makes you act in a very narrow way. You don't grow. So if you think, yes, I'm going to make it, willpower, I'm going to quit the drug. You don't have all those connections, all the wiring, all the electricity to lit up these things to be joyful and happy and challenged and start learning and do things. That's the problem. You can't just quit.
That's fascinating, because you can't even access the same level of joy as you did when you had that short-term sugar fix or short-term cocaine snort, or you can't even access the happiness because you're not wired for it.
You're not wired. Well, you maybe are wired, but there is no electricity. So you need a very, very skilled electrician. So come on board and start hooking stuff up. That's what you need. And you know what? That takes 12 to 18 months with being drug-free from the food, from the behaviors of dieting, starving yourself, binging, purging, laxatives, all the weird process addiction that have come due to the sugar addiction as a way of controlling this monster, right? You know, the craving, the overeating, all the weird behavior that you develop as a food addict. So you need a lot of tools and support in order to make these changes. So, you know, you need professional help because you need that skill, that knowledge, that know-how, you know, the pieces, what to do. You need support groups to help you cope with the changes. So those are two different things. And it takes, at least with proper biochemical repair, with proper, you know, knowing what to do, working on sleep, on breathing techniques, on physical activity, on supplements. And of course, the food is number one. You need all that, you know, and take it easy and learn to have a good daily life routines for at least 12 to 18 months before you really have your mental horsepower back. So think about it. Well, I'm gonna do low carb keto for 2 months and nothing else. What's gonna happen? Well, boom, boom, up, down. Of course that's gonna happen because that rewiring, that reconnection, that energy in your brain, that mental horsepower doesn't come by itself. And you know, in traditional therapy, you talk about your thoughts and your feelings, and then if you understand your thoughts and your feelings, you change behavior, right? That's the way it works, right? Well, with addiction, you have to go the other way around. You have to start changing behavior because you can't play around with your false feelings caused by the drug and your false negative thoughts caused by that crazy rewiring. So you have to ignore, you know what we say, don't believe everything you think and feel. That's a good saying, you know, in the beginning, because, you know, you're so used to feeling crazy from the drug that you don't know how it feels to be real. So you have to ignore that and just change behavior, action, action, action. And that's a hard part for us coaches and counselors to make somebody, you know, just do it. Just start eating like that. And we say analysis creates paralysis. And I used to make the metaphor with my clients. If you are out there almost drowning in the sea, and I take a big board of cork, you know, cork that's in bottles.
Yeah.
And I throw it to you, you can float on that, right? But if you start picking it apart in little pieces, you're going to drown. So don't pick it apart. Quit thinking. Quit analyzing your thoughts and your feeling in the beginning because they are crazy. Just do what I tell you to do. Eat like this. Try this food. Try this. You know, use this breathing technique that I use with the relaxator. I love that one. Tape your mouth at night. Take walks. Love your family. Hug people. You know, go to the hairdresser. Get massage. And, you know, on and on and on. We have all these things that you do. Don't think, don't analyze. And, you know, in the meantime, the more good things you do, the more behavior you change, your feelings going to calm down. You're going to start feeling your real feelings. You're going to have a clear mind. You're going to have good thoughts. And it's wonderful to see people that have been in the fog when they wake up, you know, when the light comes back, the electricity, the energy in their eyes. You've seen it, I hope.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It gives me the goosebump to think about it because I've seen it so many times. And, you know, they come to you and say, I never knew the spring flowers smelled this good. I haven't, you know, felt that for years. I didn't know that blue color of the sky until now. I didn't know it was so good to hug my family, my kids, my, you know, my dog or whatever. You start alive again.
That's that almost rebalancing where you're no longer chasing the super highs, but you take joy in the small ups and downs of the day.
Daily things. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I love the phrase of you can't think yourself into better actions, but you can act yourself into better thinking.
Yeah, I love that one too. And also neurons that fire together, wire together. Because people say, and I say, why don't you take up biking? Well, no, that's no fun anymore. Well, it isn't fun until you've done it 10 times. You have to do first, then the reward comes. That's the way with everything. So just do it. Go back horseback riding, start walking. And I love physical activity. I tell people, go out in the woods, hug a tree, walk, walk, walk. We're made for walking. It's going to make things happening in your brain and in your body. And I mean, and also the important thing is when people come and they are very overweight, they are depleted, they are drained of energy. If one of those carrot chumping PTs, those one, oh, she has to exercise,
I was one of them. I might
yeah,
still be
oh
in
my
a certain
God.
way.
Oh my God, oh my God. I can think of many of my clients that would have hit you, so you
Yeah,
fell on the ground. I
quite
mean,
rightly.
you have to understand that they had no dopamine, they had no energy, they were depressed, they had foggy brain, they were in physical pain. So, I used to say to them, and by the way, you're not allowed to exercise. And they look at me like, what? What? No. I don't want you to do any. You can take your joggers on and stand on your porch, and then you go back in. That's a session. And they are so relieved because, so many times people say, starve yourself and run, thinking that would work. And of course, it was like sending a Ferrari with no brakes and no gasoline out driving around, So it's not going to work. So you have to do baby steps.
This is people who are struggling with severe obesity, right?
Yeah, well, it could be a skinny person that is totally malnutritioned, drained. They have no energy. So it doesn't have to do with weight. It has to do with what the addiction have done with them, So you have to understand that when you start working with them, to do baby steps. Don't give them, a long list of things to do in the beginning. Break it down in a few things. Keep it simple, sweetie. KISS is what we say. Keep it simple, sweetie. That's very important. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the small tasks that give success and build you in the correct direction. Information overload is just so prevalent, and it's easy to look at, oh my God, I'm not doing all of that, rather than looking at what you've done and improved on that day.
Well, they are so depleted. So if you give them a long list of stuff they're going to do, they won't even start. There's no meaning because they know I can never do any of that. They just go home and eat and cry. So it has maybe be, and also I love one day at a time. 1 day at a time. I always ask them, do you think you could do this simple program for 24 hours? Everybody say yes. Okay, I want you to only do this for 24 hours and call me tomorrow. Then we can make a new commitment only for today. And that holds them up at lunchtime when they are craving. No, I'm only going to do it for today. In the afternoon, I'm only going to do it for day. And she said to me to take a salt shot. I know salt is bad, but I'm going to take a salt shot. It's not bad, but that's what you learn.
Yeah.
And you have this very simple skeleton or things to hold on to, and you do it for 1 day. And then the last thing you do in the evening, you do the gratitude list, and you see, what can I be grateful for today? Well, I actually follow the program. And if you can fall asleep with that satisfaction, you have a little bit more energy in the next day. And then you say to yourself, could I do it for another 24 hours? Yeah, I could. And that's how you build recovery.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's not beach 23, I'm telling you.
Yeah. it is a slow process of building and staying in the moment, not thinking in the past and not thinking too far in the future. I think they say that thinking in the past makes you depressed and thinking for the future makes you anxious.
Of course. Be here and now. And that's what addicts have a hard time with. And then having support from people that understand what you're going through. that can say when you lose hope in the evening, you're hungry, you're craving, you're tired, and you call one of your friends and you want to cry and say, how am I going to be able to do this? Well, you know what? Why don't you go to bed because you're tired? Call me in the morning. There's somebody there on the other side, they've done it. They coach you through it. Yeah.
100%. Bitten, we've spoken for over an hour now. I think the time has absolutely flown by. It's been absolutely fascinating. Where, if people want to hear more about your information or your work or your books and what you're putting out, where can they find you? Well,
my book is currently being translated to English. It's not done yet, so it's only in Swedish. But, they find me on bittensaddiction.com, Bitten, S like in Sam, addiction, one word.com. And there's information on my website. And also, there's several podcasts with me all over the place that they could listen to. And then, if somebody wants help and they feel lost, email me on my website. There's a contact. And I promise to put you in touch with somebody that can help you. I always do, because I have a list of people that I've trained that is standby ready to help anyone that wants help.
Amazing. Bitten, thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm looking forward to speaking again in the future.
Okay. You're more than welcome back.